Hello, we are now in front of the Giralda, which is the bell tower of the Cathedral of Sevilla. Its name comes from the wind vane, which is on top of it. And some people say that since the wind vane turns round, we use in Spanish the verb girar, and the word Giralda could be derived from girar, but that's not sure. So the wind vane is 7 meters high, and it has a nice replica close to the cathedral so that people can see it from closer and realize its real dimensions.
So the bell tower is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's built on the exact spot where there was a minaret of the former mosque, which was here. When the Spanish retook Sevilla in 1248, they turned into a bell tower. And even though Sevilla has many unique sites, many things can be clearly said to be iconic, the bell tower de Giralda is really the iconic image of Sevilla.
That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adela, for this nice introduction to Sevilla. So we all learned a little bit, at least, about Sevilla. That is very nice to see all these different sides of this wonderful town. I've been once to Sevilla, and it's just great. It's just a wonderful town, and to have some impressions of this wonderful town, it's really nice. Thanks so much, Adela. Now we are coming to our third keynote of this wonderful conference, and I think all of you know this young gentleman, Jan von Brocke from the University of Liechtenstein. I've been knowing Jan for almost 30 years now, back to our joint days in Münster. And from Münster, he went to the University of Liechtenstein and made this little tiny place of Liechtenstein a quite famous one for our field, for the BPM field. And he was one guy of this initiative group to add the track 3, the management track, to the BPM conference. So the BPM conference used to be quite technical, quite something for the computer science people. And with adding track 3, the management track, it opened then for all the business-oriented information systems people. And I think since then, BPM even grew much more and broadened its scope. So it's now really a great conference, and the conference for the whole BPM field. And thanks to this initiative to add that management track, that was really great. Is there something like BPM science or process science? So far, we all talked about business process management and business process mining and business process modeling. But is there something like a science about business processes? Jan thought about it a little bit, and he will share his ideas about the process science with us now. Jan, I'm really glad that we could convince you to give the third keynote here in this great, wonderful conference, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Jörg, dear participants around the globe. It's a huge privilege for me to talk to you today. And thank you really, Jörg, so much for your very kind words and for so nicely setting the scene for my presentation today. I will share a few slides with you, which serve hopefully to elaborate a little bit on the idea of establishing process science. And then I so much look forward to inviting you all to discuss and further shape this idea. When I was asked to deliver a keynote, I was really thinking about what could it be that might advance the field, and it of course all started with an idea. And as you will see, we will talk a lot about temporality and evolving activities and actions. And it was just the same with this idea of, as Jörg so nicely illustrated it, to develop something like a process science, maybe to suggest it, to play around with it. It took already, was a really, really exciting experience so far. It started with a very, very modest idea to say, and that relates to the title a little bit. We first thought we should call it Towards Process Science and a question mark, right? And when I sent that to Marlon, Marlon said, "Why question mark? Get away with it. Get rid of the question mark." And so we did this. And so it is now Towards Process Science. So it's a statement more than a question. And then I saw in Marlon's opening note, he already positioned the talk to the rise of process science. So, and that may have scared me a little bit, but let's see if we probably can confirm this and maybe do an exclamation mark in the end to say, yes, we want to go towards process science. When I say we, I really would like to emphasize that this whole process has been a journey, an exciting journey, I must say, also for me personally, where I continuously, in a very evolving way, learned. And you see, here is the team of people we very, very intensively discussed together with around the idea of process science, I'd say like the past half year at least, and very intensively working on conceptualizing this. And of course, you will see from the various quotes and from knowing the people here on the slides that all these people, they have worked towards a process science and thought about it. Some of them even published on it. Some of them holding chairs with the name of process science. I will come back to that bit later. So it is somehow out there, but then it's at the same time not. So not really, not conceptualized. And that's exactly kind of where we are starting. But I really would like to recognize Will van der Aals, Thomas Griesold, Jan Mendling, Brian Pentlin, Jan Recker, Maximilian Röcklinger, Michael Roseman, and Barbara Weber, who have been very inspirational also. And loads of what I'm saying here is actually really not my opinion, but it is what we have been able to accomplish as a team. And that said, I really would like to invite whoever has an interest in joining this discussion and joining the team. We'll come back to that later, probably, because we think this would be is a very inspirational idea and next step. So when talking about process science, I thought about what shall I now pick out, and how can I probably set the scene also for a joint discussion in this discussion round, but also over the conference and hopefully also after the conference, even much more. So certainly I'd like to give you a bit of a more proper introduction of process science. So what is it, probably what fascinates us, what is it that sort of kicks off this idea? But then also I'd like to give you some more, actually 4 specific reasons why we think a science of process, a process science should be there, and why it would be the right time to pull it together. Then, of course, the question very much is, what is it? So we are so happy with what we're doing. So what's the difference now? So if we would kind of buy in this and join this discussion and join this sort of thinking in terms of a joint process science. And certainly also, since we're all pragmatic people, how to do process science, right? So of course, this won't be a prescription, but will be a first set of ideas which came to our mind and which might illustrate a little bit how a process science could look like. And that's it. So these are sort of the 3 main things I'd like to talk about. Why, what is it, and how can we do it? And then certainly give a little bit of a summary. So let me start right away. I think probably the key thing, what I personally also, and I'd say we all probably share is so exciting is that it all happens through process, right? At least that's our worldview. I would say there might be different worldviews. Some people might say it all happens through something else. But if you think of it, it all evolves through, we experience through process, we articulate ourselves through process, everything materializes, shows effect through process and also in process, as we will see. And I just want to illustrate this here a little bit with kind of also setting the scene for real world phenomena, right? We talk loads about business processes. So business, of course, happens through process. Our mobility happens through process. Conference happens through process. It's actually conferencing rather than a conference with a couple of objects and structures we are used to, as we see in this conference. But also we see happiness in the end is determined by process. It's the process we experience which sort of makes us feel good or bad, which helps us to do good things or bad things. And that said, we see that also a lot of counter effects, which we sort of do not like to see so much, like pollution or social imbalance or pandemics. They also happen through process, right? They are caused by process. And if we think of the pandemic, are also mitigated or managed or taken care of as good as we can through process, right? By keeping certain distances, by using certain technology to do things we were used to do more in person in the past. So, and actually that's why I have this sign here, good or bad. What I also think is, it actually really is about the process if things we do turn out good or bad. And that's even bigger, right? It's not only the good things and the bad things, but it's also the influence whether things turn out to be good or bad. So, wow, congratulations and fantastic opportunity, I would say, to all of us. So we are really at a point in time and life and context where we can make a huge contribution to the field. And when I say field, I don't mean really only kind of our academic field, but actually to society and to economy, to the world. So I hope this is all encouraging for us. And we all know that also tiny little steps and multiple contributions will lead to this. But I love to think of this and share this vision that this is a great opportunity for us as process researcher or process scientists to contribute to the solution of real world problems. And this is also what makes the discipline, of course, accounted and well respected and funded and exciting and fun to work with, okay? So I think I don't need to preach this here to you, but just like to reconnect to this. This is a fantastic opportunity. The thing I'm talking about today more is that, however, we all, of course, also we only look at parts. We tend to focus on aspects. So we might do models, or we might do mining, or we might do algorithms, or we might do architectures, and that's, I think, no criticism. It's natural. Because we cannot, not everybody can do everything, right? So it is part of how we would organize the field is that we focus on aspects. But I guess you all know this six blind men and the elephant thing, right? Which I think is nicely describing what we're at, right? So six blind men and they're kind of experiencing something there. It's apparently an elephant, but nobody knows because they are blind and they are only experiencing through their senses they have available, and so probably also from the conceptualization they are used to think in terms of, right? So it's a snake or a spear or a wall or it's a fan, right? So, and now, dear colleagues, please excuse this little humorous attempt to illustrate this and to bring this a little bit in the process world. So my colleagues we are working with and we're discussing, and of course they do much more things than this, so I'm not trying to limit the huge background of my dear colleagues and our dear colleagues to these questions. But at the same time, I just use this for the sake of the argument and the sake of a bit of a joke, which might come in okay, I hope. So Will, for instance, right, he would look in digital traces and asked, what do the traces tell us? here. So you might be able to see the traces of the elephant without knowing it's the elephant actually, right? But looking at the traces and trying to, wow, what is it? What is it? Do the traces tell me, right? Barbara might say, there's sort of data and traces also. Can we make this an adaptive thing? Can we, can we make this adaptive? Other colleagues might ask different questions. Thomas might say, can we change the way here? So when I understand how it's kind of moving in a way, can we change it? And how can we do this? And Max would say, value-oriented elephants. So how does this now create value maybe? Yeah? And Michael, excuse me, might say, how can we radically rethink this, right? Can we come up with something, what is it? Can we just radically rethink it? Whatever it might be, okay? And then other colleagues, of course, Brian Pentland, he might be very much, I will talk about his work a bit more later, he is very much in looking into kind of that everything is in flux and everything is evolving. So you might ask like how is this moving actually, right? So trying to understand and observe and describe the movements and then try to derive insights from this. And Jan, we know he's a great guy to connect stuff. And he would say like, oh, there's a tree, there's a fan. How does that relate, right? So the technical bits and the business bits. So trying to get the head around this. And Jan, the other Jan, the Reka Jan, excuse me, would probably ask, how can this establish new territory? So what is fundamentally different? And how can we, what can we do really, really, really different? How is that establishing new grounds? Okay. So now, and myself, I'm asking, how can we get this all together, right? How can we, is it possible at all we draw something like an elephant or an ever-evolving, adapting, whatever kind of thing, which supports us further in working on this and sharing and accumulating knowledge and on kind of elephants or animals or processes more importantly and more obviously. So that said, I'd also like to link back to what some of us might be very, very used to, very well established and well-known model here is the model Will and colleague Damiani have published also, and also provided a first and probably the first and only definition, at least I was able to find, on something called process science, or the label process science. And we all know this. I don't want to repeat too much on this, but just making sure we are connecting here. So there is this notion of process science, data science, and the role here very much on process mining, right? And that process mining is something which might connect both worlds, and we will actually see that there will be a lot of analytics and data capturing on process and process flow and process context and process temporality. In fact, in what we are looking at also in process science. So we try to build on this, and we try to now, however, focus more on process science. So every conceptualization is sort of purposely made, and here this conceptualization, I would assume, was purposely made to illustrate the role of process mining in kind of bringing together data science and something called process science. But we would now like to double click a couple of times and unfold more what this kind of process science bubble here might look like actually. And that said, also, and I won't tease you with too much literature, but just want to recognize up front, there is work. We're actually also putting together a manuscript at the moment. I'm happy to share this, where we go through all the thinkers which have been contributing. Actually, interestingly, only two publications, the one I already mentioned from Bill and another one from Jan Mentling, they would actually use explicitly the term process science so far. So it's weird, isn't it? So considering that like when I proposed the talk, Marlon said, no question mark, right? It is already out there. So it's just like showing this kind of interesting sort of duality in the sense that, of course, we would some say, yeah, obviously that's there. And then if you look at it further, it's actually kind of not there so much, as I said earlier. So that's kind of intriguing. But even much, much more work you will find if you do not only look for the label process science, but for a sort of process thinking. We see here Abbott or Pettigrew, Brian Pantlin himself, Jan Recker did a wonderful piece putting together different views on process. And you see already here, it's covering social science, it's covering org science, it's covering computer science. So there are so many different angles people can take. And as Jörg nicely illustrated and set the scene in the very beginning also, I was also thinking back to Sydney conference where we did this really, really exciting endeavor of kicking out a management track, and through this 3-track system, which we realize now is very successful, not only to promote the management side, but also actually to illustrate the wider coverage of people being interesting in process from various angles, as it is very much here the idea also of a process science. So that said, and trying to set the scene a little bit, I'd like to be more precise now, talking about what would be actually very specific reasons why should we do process science, and why not just go on, right? It's always probably very convenient just to continue doing, and why should we bother at all, right? So 4 reasons I'd like to talk about. The one reason, the first probably and most obvious one, is that to date, process science is buried in disciplinary silos, right? And if you look at the silos here, interestingly, well-selected picture, I can tell. But first of all, the silos, they are, you know, leveraged in a little bit, yeah? They are alleviated, so people will say like, this is my silo. But also those who realize there is a bridge connecting silos. So I'm obviously aware, and we are all aware, there is interdisciplinary work going on, there is transdisciplinary work, but it's like more bridges between silos probably than something which we will be talking about using the label of process science today. Illustrating this a little bit more, probably the most prominent silos, if I may say, from at least my own worldview. We are all bound to limited to our own worldviews, but let's say like in our world, and probably also the track system shows this, and the presentations at the conference show this. We have computer science, and then we have what we call the management track, sort of management, org science. We need to consider org science is not management science, of course. There's very many different shades again to it. But just here again, for the sake of illustrating, the more the computer related and more the org related, and then in the middle, like myself, I would have been trained as an information systems scholar, actually studied information systems with Jörg in Münster, like quite a few of us did. So that would be sort of my home understanding. But from this, we would know there are different perspectives. And if you see here, the phenomenon of interest is a bit different. There's the one is more the real technology, then there is more the organization, how organizations behave, and then information systems, we might look into technology in use, much more socio-technical, right? Technical, social, technical. And then there's formal research, very impressive formal research, as we have also in the fundamentals track. And then there would be behavioral research, really interesting, just trying to understand and observe. Then not only design science in information systems, of course not, but just as an example here, an exemplar, design science would try to combine both worlds in information systems. And I also try to give a few examples. So there's process mining, process modeling, automation, process simulation, probably more on the technical side. And there's process theory. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. Strong, weak process theory, which is one example of what comes out of the org science work there. And then probably in the middle, there might be stuff like maturity models, frameworks, methods, principles, you know, just try to give a bit of an understanding of the different flavors of this work. But then more importantly, actually, I would like to mention that's just probably 5% of what makes a process, right? Because if you just take 2 additional examples, the built environment, I once did a project with a Finnish hospital where we looked into how is actually the architecture of the building built and how is that now supporting or hindering processes, right? And there you look into space and architecture, you research by design, you really build stuff and try it out and see how people would behave, and you analyze flows, and that's also what probably comes out. You have a process flow, process experience, architecture, patterns, that kind of stuff. And then on the other hand, just another example, some of you may know, like Barbara and myself, for instance, we share an interest in neuro information systems, where we try to check body data in order to inform the design of systems and processes. And that's super interesting because you're actually getting data from emotions and how people feel, what's on their, not what's on their mind, not yet, but kind of what's going on in their mind probably, and what's driving their behavior. And that's very, very, very heavy on experimental research, for instance. And you get stuff like, to what extent is a process causing stress, right? Or how can I make a process stress adaptive so that traders are only allowed to trade when they feel comfortable and not too aroused. Actually, Philips has a couple of years ago already a patent for bracelets helping the traders on the stock market according to kind of making better decisions according to their stress level. So again, I can't, as you see, can't go into detail here with all those pillars. And even more important, it's just really just examples. I think we see right away very strong disciplines, really solid work, which is going on in each of those disciplines. But then there's a little cross-fertilization. And also, we're talking here about, is it, well, I'd say 5%, I said 5%, it's maybe a bit more than 5%, but you never know. It's just probably not the full, most likely not the full story. And that's exactly now what process science would hope to overcome, really saying, no, we don't think of discipline first, we think of process first. So we really put process in the focus and then ask ourselves, hey, what could different disciplines actually contribute to the understanding and interventions and the design of processes? And you see here, I have already broadened a little bit the scope. So it's still computer science, management science, and information systems, but it also would be law and ethics, big time. And we will talk about this in a couple of examples also. The more processes are kind of happening in a pretty autonomous way around us, it is very important to consider also environmental aspects kind of the systems environment in that sense, with ethics and law, built environment, cognitive science, you know, all informing the design and understanding of process. And I just want to illustrate, there will be so many more. And now here's the difference now. I've just showed you literature in the beginning saying, oh, look, process management needs to embrace more disciplines, yeah? Or social science needs to do this and this and this and this more. This is actually not the idea of process science now, to rename any of those into process science, and not at all also talking at the BPM conference to stop saying BPM but say process science. That's absolutely not the idea, and it wouldn't serve the purpose, right? Because there's an infinite opportunity of having different disciplines to contribute. So this is why we should have, like, you know, one integrating platform to meet, to engage, to accumulate knowledge. And since the focus is on process, and since what we're doing is science, we hope to, or we find it appropriate to say it's process science, right? Yeah, and this is kind of the first reason. A second reason, and this is why it makes so much sense also to look at process in the very center, is that we see that processes grow outside existing containers. And what I mean with this, I try to illustrate a little bit again with a bit of a, excuse me for this, but a bit of a provocative or also humorous way of doing this. You see, there used to be times where processes happened in computers. So, of course, computer science was studying processes, right? Or we're very early to study processes. And the same way also, of course, processes happened in organizations. If you think of Taylorism, for instance, and before, you know, early org science and scientific management, processes happened there. So of course, this kind of the science taking care of this container, since the process was inside the container, of course they said, yes, we study process. And if I may talk a bit about the journey now of here, the process making its way out of these containers and growing, further, then one kind of thinking could be that we realized at some stage that, oh, it's not only taking place in computers, but also with people. That's probably when I studied information systems, we sort of realized that, at least I realized it in my study program. It's not only the ERP system, but it's also, there are also processes which do not use technology at all or information technology at all. So we need to also look into those which are non-automated. And then of course, the most interesting bit is kind of where this both comes together, partly computer, partly people. Then of course also we very much realize, oh, it's not only an organization, no, it's multiple organizations, and we have supply chains, we have supply networks, and we looked into interchange of intersections of processes across organizations, inter-organizational systems, and this kind of stuff. I don't need to tell you too much about it, just to illustrate this. We then talk about platforms, two-sided markets, much more customer-oriented processes. So where kind of what organizations do is more in the backbone, and in the front end, what really sort of matters and what enables new business models would be very much customer-centric and user-centric going on. And then ultimately, and certainly we can go on and go on and go on, but what I must say I personally find very fascinating and got me thinking a lot about process science is the fact that process now is really all over the place, right? It has moved out of whatsoever. It is in between everything. It's actually the glue, right? It is what keeps things together. It's not inside anything at all, but it really is, you know, just in between of us, right? In between me and the screen, and you and the screen, and your surrounding, and it's there. And data is sort of in the cloud, and functionality is algorithms, and is in the cloud. So it is in objects, it's in our cars, it's in our toothbrush, it's in our houses, it's everywhere, right? And this is interesting for so many things, and I can't go into detail with all of them, but one thing I think is clear, how to keep control of process, right? As long as it is in a box, it's easy, as like with the children, right? As long as they are at home most of the time, perfect. Yeah, you can always take them and look after them. But the more they get out of your control, you know, so kind of here process also get out of a single control. So we have kind of multiple agency and man-machine and governance aspects, and so many interesting topics related to it, that it actually, again, makes perfect sense to take this as a phenomenon and unit of analysis itself, not inside anything else, but as it is, primarily process, and then ask yourself, okay, now how does process actually materialize? How does it evolve? And what form of process do we see? Some inside boxes, some across 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes, some across objects. I guess you're getting where I'm heading towards. This is the third aspect related to why it is so interesting and so timely. And this is that processes continuously evolve over time and context. And for me, one of the very, very strong moments of truth, or a really, really super impactful moment, was Sydney once more, where Brian Pentland gave his keynote. And we invited him over to give the keynote for the management track. So you see, it all seems to fit together really, really nicely and timely. And in his slides, he had a picture of a car, which would actually be a bit rotten. And you see here in my car, I chose this picture. Actually, some flowers and grass is growing already, making the point that everything is in flux. Everything. There is no stability. Stability is only in a moment. And if I would take you outside and show you the beautiful mountainous region of Liechtenstein, you wouldn't believe that that used to be north of Africa. If you would look into it, how kind of the mountains have evolved. And it's very hard to believe because it looks very solid. It actually is not. And this is what makes process so interesting also. And I see this is something which, for instance, at least wasn't out there very much when I studied information systems, and also not when we kind of probably started our group so much. It is very much more out today through process mining again, very much where we can take data from so many different sensors and analyze it and actually engage into exploring this this liquid way of how things evolve. And if you look into oxides, there would be like two, just to give examples, two approaches or two conceptualizations. The one is, I call it 1 and 2 here, because I don't like to say weak or strong process theory, because you will see, I think both are equally strong or important. The one is the one here where you more or less have entities, you have concepts, and you look how things interact in between those entities. And the other is complete liquid. It's like Heraclitus said, a man never steps in the same river twice, for two reasons. For one, it's not the same river, and for the other, it's not the same man, right? So see how far process science actually dates back, and how philosophical it can get when you think of it. Trying to be more pragmatic again, how would that relate now to our process world? Just from the top of my head, the one would be, we look into process models and we have interaction diagrams. They would, I think, symbolize that very well by saying we have those entities and now there's some interaction going on between those. And the other then again would be more really the whole analytics and trying to understand, like, let's call it mining, yeah? Let's call it multi-sensor networks. And interestingly, of course, not only the mining in our ERP system, but really the mining in data, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, which we can take again from everywhere. And event-based architectures I find super fascinating as a means there, where you collect events, all sorts of, and then you start analyzing them and analyzing through algorithms, and those algorithms again, they would create events. And so it's a whole super interesting area, I think, in order to explore actually and learn how processes would evolve. But then again, as I said, it's not either or, but I very much realize it of course takes both, and much more also, because it is just also a matter of choice. Am I up for exploring the richness and finding new conceptualizations in something? Then it's very good. I'm not limited, right? I run around with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I want to not be influenced like that. So I would be more in mode 2 here. While at the same time, if I would run around all the time in mode 2, it would kill me, of course. I wouldn't be able to get anything accomplished. So I need to come up with boxes eventually in order for complexity management, for communication purposes, for so many other reasons. So I'd say we need this, but we also need to challenge it continuously, right? So we try to understand the world and you should get all the data and everything, all the analytics we have available there. And then we try to sort of conceptualize it. And at the same time, we again continuously look into what's going on and challenge our conceptualizations all the time. But that would be, at least from what we were thinking about, would be something ideal. So the fourth reason why we should have process science, I can really cut that long story short here, is because I talked about it already. I think it's a huge historic opportunity to do something really, really relevant, which will be recognized by people, by governments. We will make the world a better place eventually. I just, for the sake of the argument here, took the Sustainability Development Goals. Some of you know the kind of the Grand Challenge research. Jörg and I, we did some work on this together, published in the BISA journal, for instance, and others did work on this as well. And this would really, really mean now, how can we relate our work to tackle climate change, to tackle equality, to tackle pollution, emissions, and these kind of things. And of course, we won't solve the problem, but at least we can challenge ourselves, and I like that, to at least argue how might that what I do eventually lead to and inform solutions which are needed there. And I'd say there's the golden age of process science, I'd say, because we can really, really make an impact which is very, very much needed in our lives. So now, what is process science? I chose to keep that very short because I hope we all have started to get the understanding of what is actually process science. And I'd like to come back to this initial thinking, which I motivated earlier already in the silo section, is that we really, really want to put process in the focus and then try to leverage interdisciplinary contributions of any kind you might be able to think of, but plus for the sake of impact, right? For the sake of doing something meaningful with it. And this is where application areas very much come in, and also knowledge and application areas like health or like government or like private life or like retail or you name it. So process science, that a working definition, you're all invited to contribute and discuss, further develop this. But we say like is an interdisciplinary study of process. Yeah? And then of course we like to disclose what our understanding of process is: sequences of actions and events. But not only actions and events, but those as they take effect over time and in context. And this is something very much relating then to the understanding of that. It's not only what's in my model on paper, but it's really actually how it takes effect and in context and time. And we know how super different things can be depending on when and where they happen. And then the green bit here, also not only because we can do it, but really for the sake of understanding, influencing, and designing processes. To understand them, influence, and design. I will come back to this differentiation in a minute. So, having said that, what is process science? I'd like to take a couple of more minutes elaborating a little bit around the question, okay, now what's different then? I would hope you would not object to what we have shared so far, and you would say, yes, that seems to make sense, and there's good opportunity to do it. But also ourselves, when we were discussing this, we were like, so what now? Okay, yeah. So what is it? How can we make a difference now? And how does that really look like? Okay. So what we tried to do is we chose an example. And you know, the Uber example is an example Brian Pentland wrote about, and also Jan Recker and Jan Mentling in their Aegis editorial wrote about this. And so it's a good example, I'd say, also an example we can use in order to accumulate kind of our understanding around it. And the first question here, which I like, is it stems from a tweet we saw the other day. Is there a Christmas party for Uber drivers? Right? We don't know. I'm not an Uber driver. Some of you might be. It would be interesting to see in the chat later on. Is there a Christmas party? Why are we using this? Using this in order to show this is not an organization we are used to, right? This is not an organization where somebody says tomorrow is Christmas party and we all go and we all, you know, kind of behave according to the institutional logic of having a Christmas party. No, it's people in private households. They decide, oh, okay, I go driving for a bit, and they are an Uber driver in the moment they are driving and transporting. So they are actually, as we said, they are more really in the process and not in the organization. So showing that processes grow out of the containers. At the same time, showing that there's a lot of interesting research on such new phenomenon of a process around Uber and the process landscape around Uber is here exemplified. We just did a little bit of research on studies tackling different aspects of Uber. There's in economics, talking about the disruption of kind of the taxi business. Then there is in psychology, what drives people actually to jump in cars and do it and say, yes, I start a new life, or kind of a part-time life as an Uber driver here, right? As cognitive science also, as I said, yeah, somebody actually here considering himself to be a cognitive scientist and then talking about air quality and temperature measures. But I think the point is rather kind of this data analytics perspective, trying to pull together as much data as possible on sort of the driving process, and then trying to see what we can do with this. There's from the built environment work on what would cause more accidents, and of course artificial intelligence, how to optimize, how to change, how to optimize the routing and the algorithm in the Uber software. So you see, I hope it's a bit of also showing and that these different perspectives, but at the same time, I think it shows they're really not connected, right? Somehow certainly they might be connected, but it's more a coincidence if somebody would pick up on the one study and on the other and say, oh, let's probably do something. And process science would actually then look into bringing this together. Also, what I found so interesting is to learn that how many experiments are conducted there. It's like here, if you look into the statistics, is 1,000 experiments sort of in the software trying to do things different and see how they would take effect in the Ubering process. Finding this a very interesting proof for the whole thing of the dynamics of a process. So it's actually not stable at all, but there are more than 1,000 usually modifications to how this process is actually also steered software-wise due to these experiments conducted. And then linking back to probably showing what could now a process science around this make a difference in addition to what's already there, is that we might be able to pull this together. So here's an example where we might pull together like engineering and more cognitive science and computer science contributions in order to, like, for instance, measure the stress level of drivers and only allow them to take passengers when they are in a healthy state of arousal. I mentioned this Phillips pattern a few years ago already. They equip kind of the traders on the stock market with bracelets, and if they have a too high arousal or too low arousal, they're not allowed to trade because research has shown they take bad decisions. So we could have something very similar here. And you see, interestingly, this is not only a study and insight from one perspective. No, this will actually change the way the Uber ring will be done. We are deliberately saying here Uber ring because in order to show it's actually not an organization, but it's rather a process we're talking about. And there would be so many more different examples. I don't want to stretch this too long, just to take a couple of more examples here to stimulate the understanding. Another very interesting understanding would be to look into how would regulations actually impact the process. And how would new regulations be taken into account in the process? How can we design processes which would probably be rapidly adaptable in order to increase the resilience of Ubering, right? Another example could be, we could try to measure the air quality, predict the traffic, predict social media posts. So very, very different data sources from many kinds in order to optimize the way the drivers are going, but probably also feeding this back into the traffic control by opening up additional lanes or varying speed limits and these kind of things. So again, kind of process takes effect in real life. That would be super interesting. And as well, another example here, one could analyze mobility patterns and happiness levels of people, take data from technology forecasting, in order to then come up and inform an innovation process on, hey, how could probably new processes in the mobility sphere look like? And interestingly, then also beyond the discipline, the well-established one, maybe like offering food in traffic jams or offering amusement or information or whatever on demand according to different preferences. So feeding into innovation, but also into utilizing time much better as it might be in a non-process science world. So when I talk about that process science, and some of you may have seen this, for scientists now the question is, okay, where do I engage? So on what level would I like to engage? And interestingly, now maybe that it might also be biased now from my understanding, but like in information systems, we're very well trained on understanding different types of questions we might be able to ask and in our research. And on a very pragmatic level, we distinguish between descriptive, explanatory, predictive, and prescriptive things we could do. And so we could have a descriptive process science, for instance, which is more really trying to collect data, really describing what's going on. Right? And this is, for instance, relating to what Brian Pentland nicely has talked about and written about interestingly also on how can we collect data through process mining in order to study in the end the change in organizations, right? And that would relate also to open data formats. It might relate to open data streams. Maybe we set up a shared data stream where we collect in a living lab. We collect data. And we can all look at it then later and analyze it. But first of all, describing what's going on in order to be able to find new things and to challenge our understanding we are so used to at the moment. And then building on that, of course, we'd like to explain. We do not only want to describe, but some might, you know, there's also room for specialization. Some groups, they might want to be more on the descriptive level. Others, however, would like to, okay, great, I pick on this. They may not have the equipment, but they say like, okay, let me have a look. I try to make sense of it. I try to explain it and try to relate data, analyze data, and then also triangulate. We talk loads now, of course, about process analytics and mining, but also it is very well understood that this is not enough. We need also rich context data, and we need to triangulate. We need to do archive analysis. We need to do interviews. We need to do case study research. We need to, you know, look at it and try to really understand the rich context in order to be able to interpret, to make sense out of the data we've collected. Once we have made sense of it, we might be able to predict. That would be really cool, right? Predicting change in process. So saying like, whoa, next month we need to do this and that different in the process. Being able to preempt change probably also, and be able to foresee change and predict things. That would be like in predictive process science, process simulations, for instance, for decades looked into this. And then on the top level, which would be also super fascinating, is prescriptive process science. So really through all this understanding of description, explanation, and prediction, be able to make normative statements, go out to organizations and say, this is what you should do. Or to build and develop tools, methods, models, which, for instance, would be neuroadaptive, right? Neuroadaptive processes. Those examples I used from Uber, where the car would not allow me, or my device would not allow me to take on people I would like to drive in terms of arousal levels. That would be something, you know, that would be a tool, that would be a prototype, that would be a new business model. Or this is what, for instance, design science research, some of us are very engaged in this area also, would contribute loads, and where we would be able to very much, of course, demonstrate societal value. But there's no value difference in it. I'd say there's space for so many different studies, but it's just also one example. We might extend, we might have different structures, but I found it interesting to see, okay, process science can actually happen on the various different levels. So we could all position a single study on one of those levels, and also PhD students could kind of look into, okay, in my area I'm interested in, to what extent do we already have studies on the various levels, and which level is it that I should then take? While this was more for the academic view, so probably also a little bit implications for research, so how can we plan and position research, I'd like to come back to Marlon. I mentioned Marlon in the very beginning when he made some suggestions for title changes. And so Marlon kept challenging, which I very much appreciate, Marlon. Thanks really a lot for this along the way, actually. So here's the one quote he was posting on Twitter to say like, is that now here after data science or process science, the next sexiest job of the future, right? And I was like, woo, let's see what we think. Those who know me would know it's not the next sexiest. It's not about linear way to say this is the most sexy and this is a little bit less sexy or so. I think it's also sexy, right? So it is just probably, it is another very sexy job of the future, I would probably say, for those who find more interest in this, and others find more interest in this and that. But I found that was challenging. And then in his opening note, and I took this picture here from Marlon, again, he was challenging while he said, like, he was announcing my talk here today by saying, I will talk about job profiles of process scientists. And that was the first time I was actually thinking about that. And I mean it in a very good way, because I really liked that. It actually challenged my thinking. I was like, for such a long time, I was actually thinking about process science and discussing with all my colleagues, and never really brought it down so pragmatically, saying like, no, okay, what is actually the skill set of a process scientist then, right? So what we did was I took the challenge together with the team, and right after the opening, and my colleagues can confirm this, I reached out to the colleagues and said, hey guys, did you hear Marlon there? What would you think, very spontaneously, what would be the job profile of a process scientist? What would you include there? Just shoot me a couple of bullet points. And I must say that was amazing. And it also was beyond of what came out of this. And I'm talking about that in a minute. For me, it was showcasing so nicely what we are able to accomplish if we all throw together and do things together from the various different perspectives. And we actually, I was hoping for 24 hours, and I think we accomplished the task in 24 minutes, a bit more maybe, but that was really, really cool seeing how that worked. Probably also that was process sciencing, actually a very innovative way and nice process to do this. So here's what came out. You might know the term eierlegende Wollmilchsau. If you try to translate it, it's the egg-laying Wollmilchsau. And this is here a picture of some of you may know, Volkswagen ad, which came up with a very nice visualization of this. So that's for sure. And of course, we could say it's probably not the one process scientist, but it's probably a group. It's like we know this also, and you know, Will's talks on data science, very same way of thinking there is certainly something we cannot accomplish as a single person, but more as a team. But then also, of course, more came out, and I'd like to talk about this concluding this talk. The first of all, and that's completely, let me say, it's completely not finished, of course, right? But it's really what came out here in this quick poll, and I'd like to share this right away with you fresh. So first of all, some of the responses circled around the subject. So what is a process scientist actually doing, right? And then there was kind of, I think, first colleague said like analyze and automate processes, and then there was another colleague saying yes, but in addition, it's also about the design of effective interventions for processes, and might be also coming up with completely new processes, right? But then again, you might call an effective intervention, depending on your ontological understanding of what a process is, right? Is it, yeah, we don't want to go into detail there, but I like to say this is kind of the three aspects: you analyze, you automate, but also you design new. That I found interesting and very down to earth. And then also coming out here, very interesting 4 strategies of a process scientist. And the one is kind of, it would be evidence-based. It would be evidence-based because it's science. It's not just something an analyst would look at or a consultant and he would say, yeah, my experience is we should do it that way or that way. No, it is about collecting data, it is about really analyzing the data, various forms, also interviews or experiments or you name it, but it is evidence-based. We found that's interesting, so we need this. The other is multi-sourced because it's interdisciplinary. It's not only the one source I'm looking at, because that would be like with the elephant, right? Which we got started this morning, but it would be open to different type of data, right? And that comes with a mindset, that comes with the terminology, that comes with mutual respect, and so many different things, right? But from the outset, the strategy would be I take into account whatever I can take into account. Time and context sensitive, because it's evolving. We need to be very, very much looking into the things we don't expect to happen, right? And that is a strategy how the process scientist would work. And of course, also innovative, because it's about impact, as we said. It's not that we analyze a process for the sake of analyzing the process, but it is that we want to make a difference. We want to improve, we want to innovate, we want to better. And this is kind of, at least these 4, there might be more, but these 4 came out of our quick poll as strategies, and we found that super interesting. And then, of course, there was a whole bunch of soft skills coming up. And of course, also, which what I'm not talking about here, some things which often come up, like you need to be good in project management and to be good at complexity management or that kind of stuff. But some more interesting aspects, I'm only pulling out here the more interesting bits. Make change fast, right? Was one feedback saying like we need to have people which do things fast and try it out and get things done. We need to have people from personality be able to span boundaries. We need to have people who are curious to learn fast and also hard, because you know, also we need to want to go the hard way of trying out something very, very new. We need thinkers, critical thinkers, which actually also challenge what's in the data and try to make sense of these things. So don't want mechanical understanding only, or that's what the algorithm has spelled out, so that must be the solution. No, we want to need out in terms of ethical considerations, and this we need critical thinkers and effective communicators. And the fifth point I've exemplified here with a quote of one of the team members, I won't reveal the name here, but maybe over the coffee later on, saying we should have a well-cultivated aversion against bullshitting, because otherwise process theory or process science make it too tempting to just use a lot of big words to say very little. I like that so much that I thought I should share this quote with you, because it also again links back to it should be evidence-based, it should be science, and not only bullshit. For me then, very much, if I try to focus this even more, I'd say, Jörg, I'm with you in a minute. I'd say that it very much is about the discovery and implementation of new ways to do things. So if there would be only one job characteristic I could come up with to say like, yeah, we're not discovering patterns or something in something. No, we're discovering new ways to do things, and we also implement them. So that is exciting, and that is very timely to really very quickly summarize what I was hoping to share with you. First of all, everything happens through and in process. Then this comes with a huge opportunity for all of us, which is great and very motivating, stimulating. But in order to really leverage this opportunity, we need to integrate what we all can bring to the table. And process science is supposed to be a platform to do this. And more importantly, you're all invited to contribute. We've set up a little website where you can also subscribe by email and name an email, and then you will be part of what's going on also in the future. Thank you very much for your attention, and I very much look forward to discussing with you.
Thank you so much, Jan. That was just wonderful. That was a firework of new ideas about process science. To all participants, if you want to participate in the discussion, please use the question and answer button or raise the blue hand. And I have already 3 people in line in the question and answer. That's really great. And the first one writing something in the chat. Jan, throughout your wonderful talk, I was also like, at the end you said Marlon did, seeing the analogy with data science. Yeah. When you ask people statistics, they were saying, ah, oh, boring shit. When you say data science, they say, hip, exciting, it's great. Maybe on top of all you said, which I go along with totally, do you think process science could also be some kind of marketing aspect to give even more importance to our wonderful science?
I couldn't agree more, Jörg. Absolutely. And this also relates to, that's why I like the challenge also from Marlon, it relates to bring this down to us in terms of what does it mean for a practitioner? Yeah, what does it mean for Hilti to hire a process scientist now? Or what does it mean for Hilti to set up a process science department? Just to give an example. And then if you relate this to very attractive things to do in practice, and then I'd say it becomes obvious how sexy it is. Otherwise, it may remain sexy for us as academics. I agree.
Okay. Yeah, we have a lot of questions and in the chat. So we start with Zoran Milosevic. And Zoran, I give you the right to talk and to ask your question yourself. So now you have the possibility to talk, and if you unmute, you can ask your question yourself.
Okay, thanks very much for this, and I really enjoyed this great talk of Jan. Oh, can you hear me, by the way?
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I dared to ask you the first question when you were just talking about your first and second slide, and you talked about good and bad,
Yes.
and you talked about your colleagues which have different views on the processes. So I asked you the question, so how do you make processes ethical so that we can reason about good and bad? But you answered these questions after that, during your talk, when you mentioned, ethical, legal issues, regulatory things, and all that. But I really ask you that question because I'm involved in digital health here in Australia, and doing a lot of stuff in terms of consent, ethics, linking processes with the policies, how you can make sure that there is compliance with regulation, how you really need to support ethics by design, compliance, and all that sort of stuff. So you have answered all all my questions, but that really opened a really new area of what would I call, I guess, integration of policy and processes, where by policy, I mean policy to do with computable expression of, things such as consent, such as privacy, such as obligation, things which is more in the deontologic space, and integration with the process, but also bringing in the notion of value, so you can think about reasoning about what is good and bad. So this is more or less like a commentary, but also I'm joining you in trying to add new dimension to this big problem, and I really enjoyed your talk.
Thank you so much. I'd say also it's fantastic you say this, because it would start with recognizing that this is important, or it has an impact, right? Ethical aspects, and just to to see it. Yeah. Second is you want to take it into account. So you take a decision. Yes, I want to take it into account. Then how can I do it? I can study what's already there. There's tons of material that's already there, but which we do not tend to look at. Sometimes we don't need to because it's not in our focus and we haven't decided not to do it. That's perfectly okay. We cannot look at everything. But if we recognize it and we want to do it, then we can look at what's already there. And then the fourth thing actually would be invite people to the table. So you need to invite people into the project. You need to invite colleagues to the to your team of authors and in your projects, which are experts in that field. As I used as an example in the field of neuroinformation systems, like 12 years ago, we started this initiative, and we had a little meeting with 15 people sitting around the table, some hardcore cognitive neuroscientists, some really cool information system people, some computer scientists, and some people who had a broad interest like me, maybe. And then we started, and that has made so much of a difference. And this is what exactly the idea. There's such a table, you need get people together. That would be kind of just from the top of my head response to your much appreciated comment.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have many more questions. So all the ones who ask questions, and Jan, could you be short and precise so we can use. Gregor Polancic is the next one. I give you the.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello from Maribor, from Slovenia. So, dear Jan, thank you for your fantastic, extremely motivating presentation. So, I will vote for you to be the president of process science. So, it's insurance to be also fun, It has to be
That's
fun.
very good. You can sign up for the community on the website.
I really enjoy your presentations in general. So, thanks a lot for
Thanks so much.
Presentation. To go straight to the point of the question, process in its most generic form, it addresses not only information, but also transformation, storage of energy and materials. So there might be a possibility that people outside the business information context could misunderstand the term of what it addresses. So what is your opinion in that?
That's a fantastic point. I left this out of the presentation, but in the discussion we realized there are natural processes and man-made processes, kind of, right? And this is the end of a continuum. And what happens most in the middle is that there is some part of what's going on is sort of in natural environment sort of processes, you know, the energy, the air quality, the space, the nature. And then is what we do, and it influences each other, right? So our surrounding influences always the process. So everything happens in also the boundaries of other processes happening, but then also through the process, we again feed back to these natural processes. So that would be, I completely agree. We should not only look into man-made processes because we influence natural processes and we are influenced by natural processes, and it is about process and of all types and forms it might take. And we need to have this broad view in order to be able to see the various different facets. I couldn't agree more. That's a fantastic point. We can continue on that offline.
Thanks a lot.
Hayo, you are the next one in line.
Thank you very much, Jörg. Jan, this was fantastic. I think I could feel your energy from thousands of kilometers away. It was an amazing talk. I'll keep it short. Do you have any thoughts about how we are going to raise the next generation of process scientists? So where do we start when we want to explain young people what process science is all about? I mean, it's such a broad field.
That's fantastic, Hayo. The idea already came up to establish something like PhD seminars and probably scholarships and joint projects across our different groups. And that would actually be something I would like to very, very much follow up, because already what I think is so much is already there, right? And even if something at the moment wouldn't look so much like, you know, nothing is really the complete process science, but we all contribute, and establishing really a group of and enabling people to contribute, that would be fantastic. So I would be so up for like a PhD seminar, virtual one or so. Let's think. We have this talk, there's the virtual lecture
right,
coming up, and we might actually use this and to stimulate and do seminars.
Great.
That would be very much very, very helpful and operational.
Great. Thanks again.
Cool. Thank you so much for your nice words.
Will, you are next in line.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, very well.
Thank you very much. It's been a great presentation. Thank you so much for opening the room for so many new disciplines in process science. I have a question regarding the future of BPM towards process science. How do we imagine now a paper that introduced, as you said, is still a science, so it should be based by evidence, but each of these disciplines has different evidences, right? So how do you expect that would be the evaluation processes for a paper in process science?
I love that comment. I have this idea of developing jointly something like descriptors, right? To recognize something as process science, right? For instance, to say what process was it? What context? What time? What key activities? What key events? What are the key concepts? Then what was the question, research question? What came out? What was the strategy of inquiry? What were key assumptions? What was the justificatory knowledge? And what is prior work and what is to come, future work? For instance, something like that, to have like a descriptor to declare something to be process science, and developing such a descriptor, we could then think of what needs to be in there, what needs to be at least referred to make it recognized in process science. And then let's see how we should have venues. We should have we can share this on the website to see where this is going. I'd say that is but that would be my straightforward answer, that we need to learn more. What does it take to recognize something as process science? Right? And my understanding is this is just I did this exercise in my own work with very simple projects, and it doesn't need to be so magic. And it doesn't need to be so all over the place, but it can be something very specific, as long as you are able to then say what is the specific contribution. It is a contribution, and the more specific, the better, actually.
Okay, and next is Hugo Lopez. Are you still here?
Are you already asked? So thank you.
Okay. Then we go on with the blue hands. I see that there are 2 blue hands, but I can see them in my list. We have 2 blue hands, but I can't see them. Manuel, do you see them? Now I see it here. That's Will again. We had that already. That's Beshit. I give you the allowance to talk. Beshit Bekamal, could you ask your question, please? You have to unmute and then we can hear you.
Hello.
Yeah,
can
good.
You hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the amazing topic and the great presentation. I really enjoyed all 3 keynotes in this conference. I just have a question that, as you mentioned in the over example, we have get a lot of information from the context of the activities. For example, what happens around them. But I think the link between the link for these activities can be the location. For example, we can get information from the location. My question is that, am I right or not? And if the answer of the first question is yes, and the location is the missing link to connect the different activities.
Oh, yeah.
It is for a process. So what we can do if the location is not available in such domains? Thank you so much.
I must admit I haven't acoustically understood everything, but what I understood was the matter of location, right? Do we need to add location to activities as an attribute? And I would say yes. This would be very useful, but probably also further attributes. It's interesting when you start to think about location or concepts like distance. We would always think of geographical location and distance, but there might be further dimensions, right? There might be distance in terms of interest, or distance in terms of environment type, or different influence factors. So distance or location in terms of context. It would be great to have like a timestamp and a context stamp, and as part of the context stamp, there would be also the geographical location. And I also understand it's very difficult to capture context, so there will be a lot of research to be done further in order to improve our abilities to capture context, of course. Yeah.
Okay, Jan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
It was really a great beginning of the 3rd day of this wonderful conference. I think we all are inspired by your ideas of moving from business process management to process science, and you gave some good reasons to think if process science would be a good word for all the exciting things we are doing. So many thanks, and I think you're in the coffee break right now to take more questions if there are any. Thanks so much, it was wonderful. And to all participants, we were over 200 in the middle of the talk. Thanks to participating, thanks for your questions and for your remarks on the talk of Jan, and have a good third day of the conference, and see you all in the closing session this afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for attending and the fantastic discussions. And let's stay in touch whenever you have an appetite to further continue. I'm very, very happy to get in touch. Thank you very much for your time and energy. And thank you, Jörg. Wonderful moderation and
thank you.
kind words. Thank you. See you in the coffee break.